podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of The Paddock and the Pavilion. I hope you've been enjoying our weekly shows, which have now reached over 25 countries. Do subscribe to us on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us and let your friends know. For today's guest, we have gone local and will be interviewing John Berry, the Newmarket trainer who is famous for training the grey horse who has his own Twitter page, the Brighton specialist, Roy Rocket. Enjoy the show. Hello, John. Welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion. Pleased to have you on the show.
Thank you. Pleased to be on it.
Well, reading about you, John, you've certainly had a varied sort of career. You've been a trainer now for 25 years. You're a pundit in print and on television. You've been the mayor of Newmarket, and you also won the Newmarket Town Plate in 2011. And at the moment, the stable must be buzzing with your two recent wins at Thirsk and Chepstow.
Yes, only training a small amount of horses, you inevitably have at various times extended or semi-extended periods without any success. So to get two winners in a week after quite a long absence from the winners' enclosure was terrific.
Yeah, it must give everyone a lift at the stable.
Very much so, yes. It's only, there are myself and three others work here full time. So it's, there's every horse in the stable, everyone that works here is involved with to a greater or lesser extent. You could work in a stable of 100 or 200 horses and see the stable has had a winner and probably not even know what colour the horse was. But in a smaller unit, everyone, I would say, is involved in every horse to a greater or lesser extent. There's sometimes it might be one rides a horse every day, or just leads him in and out of the field. But it makes a big difference to the sort of general feeling of joie de vivre within the yard.
Yes, and for the listeners of this show all around the world, it's very much a hands-on operation with yourself, riding out every day. And I was reading that the stable where you are at Beverley House, there was a Grand National winner trained there in 1923.
Yes, I think this is... at one point, I was saying I think this might be the only stable in the world to have had a British Triple Crown and a Grand National winner trained in it. But then it dawned on me that Ballydoyle is also in the same boat. But George Blackwell, who trained here at the turn of the 20th century, trained the Triple Crown winner in 1902, 1903. I can't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember which.
Roxand.
Roxand. Yeah, Roxand. I think he obviously probably his success, boosted by the success of Roxand, he moved to larger premises, Lagrange, on the corner of the Fordham and Snailwell Road the following year. But as he was winding down towards retirement, he came back here in 1920, and then he trained the Grand National winner in 1923, Sergeant Murphy, before finally retiring in 1928 and handing over to his son-in-law, Henry Jellis. So with Triple Crown winner and Grand National winner. And the Grand National winner must have been Sergeant Murphy, a really local triumph, because he was amateur ridden by the local vet, Captain Tuppy Bennett, who was born between Newmarket and Bury St Edmunds, and was a vet in Newmarket, and I presume was George Blackwell's vet. So you're saying about the Town Plate. I was lucky enough in 2011 to win it in more than one role. I was owner, trainer, and rider, but I'm presuming that Tuppy Bennett was George Blackwell's vet. So that would be a sort of interesting dual role in which to win the Grand National as the horse's vet and his rider simultaneously. But no, I mean, it's a wonderful thing about Newmarket. You've got history around every corner, and we're lucky enough to have quite a lot of it in this stable. The last British Classic winner in this stable was the Henry Jellis trained 2,000 guineas winner in 1946, who's predictably, off the top of my head, the name escapes me. I can show you where he was trained. But yeah, the ambition is got to be to get another one. But of course, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have some connection with Ballydoyle anyway. So now, going back to your beginnings, you grew up in the Scottish borders of Hawick, or in Hawick. When I saw that, it reminded me of Bill McLaren, the rugby commentator. But what got you interested in horses and racing?
Well, there's a really strong, passion for horses and racing in the Scottish borders. At the time, well, I was born in Hawick and grew up near Lillersleaf, we're about 7 miles away, between the villages of Lillersleaf and Denham. When I was a boy, there were one very successful national hunt trainer just outside Denham, Ken Oliver, another one, Harry Bell, another one, John Ledbetter, trained the Grand National winner in 1978, Rubstick. Elsewhere in the borders, Dick Allen was training, Donald Fairgrieve, permit holder called Pud Reynoldsson, who trained a Scottish Grand National winner in the late 70s or early 80s, probably King Con. Hunting very popular, the common riding very popular, the riding at agricultural shows very popular. So yeah, I grew up on a farm, and pretty much all the farmers there like racing, like horses and like racing, and involved in horse sports to some extent. And yeah, I was lucky enough to grow up in a family where we liked riding, we liked racing, and so the sporting life, we had ponies when I was a child. The sporting life was always on the table. When there was racing on the television, that was always on. So yeah, I grew up interested in horses and interested in racing. Of course, I could have gone the other way. My brother is the exact opposite, would have no interest at all, and he's a lecturer in classics at Edinburgh University. So I suppose when it's that around you as a child, you'll either go one way or the other, and between the two of us, we did both.
And so you've worked in racing since you left school, and you originally wanted to be a jockey, is that right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I'm always surprised when you get young people, of my generation, young boys, because it was a rarity for girls to harbour ambitions to be professional jockeys at the time. But nowadays, being a jockey is, it's a non-gender specific term. If someone's a jockey, there's likely to be a woman as a man. It's fully open to both genders. But yeah, I'm always surprised when you find someone, a young person who loves racing and wants to make a career in it, who doesn't start off wanting to be a jockey, because it's the obvious thing, really. And I just had enough rides to sort of satisfy my curiosity and confirm to myself that I wasn't quite good enough. I mean, I'm quite a good rider, but when I was young, I just wasn't quite good enough to make it as a professional jockey, and probably not brave enough. Really, I didn't really enjoy the falls. So yeah, that didn't last very long, and ended up staying within the game and drifting towards training, but not specifically pointing myself towards it, just drifted towards it.
And you worked with Andy Turnell, Luca Kamani, and Ian Matthews. Did they give you a good grounding before you started on your own?
I couldn't have had a better first job than Andy Turnell. He'd been a terrific jump jockey before he retired. He'd retired from race riding about 2 years before I joined the stable. I mean, he retired probably earlier than he would have done because his father died. He was stable jockey to his father, and he took over his father's stable. His father, Bob Turnell, had always been a great supporter of promoting the young jockeys within the stable. Andy Turnell, very much in the same boat, and yeah, wonderful stable to work in. And bonus, the icing on the cake was I got a few race rides as well. No, couldn't have started anywhere better. And of the two flat trainers I worked for, I wasn't with Ian Matthews very long. I went to work for him. I came to Newmarket in 1987 to work for him over the summer, and ended up staying in Newmarket and moved on and had 3 terrific years with Luca Kamani when the stable was on a real high. And the dual derby winner Kayazi would have been the best horse when I was there. But I mean, it was as good a stable as there wasn't. I mean, Luca was never champion trainer, but it was Henry Cecil was champion trainer at the time. But it was as good a stable as there was anywhere in the country, and it was a wonderful place to work in every respect.
And you started training in 1995. How did that come about, working on your own?
Well, I just sort of drifted towards it, really. After I left Luca, went to Australia for a year, and I came back, and more by accident than design, I found myself working on a stud, which was Wood Ditton Stud, which is now part of Sheikh Mohammed's empire, but at the time was owned by Mr. Yong from Singapore. And I worked there for about 2.5 years, and sort of was missing the racing. I had my own horse, which a filly who'd shown nothing, which my mother had owned and had in training with Maurice Camacho, and she gave it to me sort of because she couldn't. She knew I was missing the training. I wanted to fiddle around with the horse, and she probably couldn't think about what else to do with the horse because the horse was going nowhere. And I had the horse in training with Hugh Collingridge, who trained in the stable at the time. And the great thing about working on a stud is you don't start work too early. We didn't start work till 8 o'clock in the morning. So Hugh very kindly let me take my horse out before an exercise or before I went to work every day. And I don't know how, because in every other race she showed she showed no ability, but she did win a selling hurdle on her first run over jumps at 50 to 1 at Fontwell, and of course being closely involved with the training of her, that sort of boosted my self-confidence. I'd say probably over boosted my self-confidence to make me think that I might be capable of doing it myself. And then I sort of was bold enough to take out a training license in 1995. And I mean, I went there with a very negative mindset. I went there on the basis of, if it doesn't, I've got nothing to lose. If it doesn't work out, I'm sure I'll be able to get a job on the stud back again. And I mean, I wouldn't fully say that it has worked out, but it's worked out well enough for me to continue doing it for quite a long time.
25 years, yeah. And your first runner was at Fakenham on St Patrick's Day in 1995, Which Way North. What do you remember about that day?
Well, she was the filly with the mare I've just been talking about, who had won a selling hurdle at Fontwell the previous season, was ridden by Vince Smith, who actually subsequently rode another 50 to 1 winner of a claiming hurdle at Plumpton on a filly which I owned and trained a couple of years later. And Vince is now Victoria Smith and rode Roy Rocket in a charity race at Warwick a couple of years ago. So that's a friendship and association that's been going back a long time. But Vince couldn't ride Which Way North at Fakenham because he was working for Saeed bin Saror at the time. He wasn't getting many rides as a jockey, so his main income was work rider. And he'd gone out to Dubai for the winter with Saeed. He reckoned he was getting so few rides over jumps that he was happy to miss the winter and be out in Dubai. So yeah, he couldn't ride the filly. And Shane Lyons, who was the younger brother of the former jumps jockey Ger Lyons,
the trainer,
who had recently retired and gone back to Ireland and started training in County Meath in Ireland. And Shane, his younger brother, was still a conditional jockey in Britain, and he's now back in Ireland with Ger and his Ger's assistant stroke travelling head lad. And yeah, Shane Lyons rode her, and well, I actually remember her pulling up, but running so badly that she pulled up. But the form book fortunately confirms that she did at least get round. She got round eventually. But yeah, it was a start. I remember the excitement of a trainer having your first runner, but the excitement was the participation rather than result, as it turned out. But no, it was good to get started. It was Cheltenham Gold Cup Day, the Thursday, the final day of the Cheltenham Festival that year, and yeah, up to Fakenham local course, and yeah, it was good. It was exciting to get the operation going anyway.
Yeah, well, she came 13 of 15, but you had to wait until the 7th of June at Beverley for your first winner. What do you remember about your recollections of the 7th of June 1995?
Well, I'd say it's the best birthday I've ever had. Best birthday present I've ever had. My birthday's the 7th of June, and it's the only time I've ever trained a winner on my birthday. Probably the majority of birthdays I haven't had a runner. I've had a few other times when I've had a runner, but it's the only time I've trained a winner. And it being my first winner was, you can imagine, as good a birthday as you could have. I had actually, it's contradicted, I had actually trained a winner a few days previously, but in my mind I hadn't, because Chris Dwyer, who's been a long-standing friend, former jockey who was in the process of, well, he was still race riding at the time, but he was in the process of starting training at the same time, and I'd started my process of applying for a license earlier than Chris. He was still had a jockey's license, and he was a work rider for Michael Stout at the time, and he was assembling a handful of horses, and I was assembling a handful of horses. So there was a period of a couple of months where they were under my care while he was waiting for his license to be granted. And one of them won, trained by me, ridden by Chris. But in my mind, I don't feel that I could take the credit for that. It would be unfair on Chris if I were to, as I say, take the credit for that victory. But that was a horse called Serrano's Lad at Lingfield. And actually then shortly, maybe 3 weeks later, there was another winner called Silktail, who won at the July course at Newmarket on a Saturday. Chris actually didn't ride Silktail, Gary Carter rode her. And she won at Haydock the following Thursday, and Chris's license had come through in the interim. So I trained her when she won at Lingfield, won at Newmarket, and then Chris trained her when she won at Haydock the following week. And the reason why I've gone on this slight tangent is because her Newmarket win actually achieved a degree of fame subsequently because she beat Isterbrack.
Oh, really?
I think he was runner-up. I think he was at the time was owned by Sheikh Hamdan and trained by John Gosden, and of course he went on to
win 3 champion
great
hurdles.
glory, owned by JP McManus, trained by Aidan O'Brien to win 3 champion hurdles. So yeah, that's sort of through the spring and early summer of that year. That's how the operation got off the ground. And I subsequently trained another winner that meant an awful lot to me that summer. Well, Lorelei Lee, the filly at Beverley, won. Kieran Fallon rode her. She won another race at Beverley later that season with a Hong Kong-based apprentice who was over in England for the summer called Simon Yim. But there's another winner which I remember equally fondly for the summer, from that summer, which was called Statistician, who won, also ridden by Kieran Fallon at Catterick, was owned and bred by my mother, and she died the following February. So I think that was I was very pleased to train a winner for her before she died. She was able to go to Catterick. She was suffering from terminal cancer at the time, and as I say, she died about 6 months later. So, but yeah, that was that's how it got off the operation got off the ground and left a few very special memories.
So you had more than one first winner by the sounds of it. Well, you moved...
Yes, yeah.
Luca Kamani trained his first winner in May 1976 at York when Three Legs won the Duke of York Stakes.
You moved to Beverley House in 1997. I was looking up your figures. Your best seasons have been 1999, 2011 and 2017 on per winners. And you've trained over 150 winners. What are your highlights and what has been the best ever day's racing during your 25 years?
Well, the best ever day paradoxes all the way through. My best ever day's racing is a victory which doesn't appear in the form book, because that's the aforementioned Town Plate win as owner, trainer and rider in the world's old. It's not certain it's the world's oldest race, because the Kipling Coates Derby in Yorkshire has also been going for a long time. But the Newmarket Town Plate, which started in, is it 1666 or 1665? I think it's 1666. There's no sort of official documentation for the Kipling Coates Derby going back all the way, but there is for the Newmarket Town Plate. And so it's the world's oldest documented race, and it's great for me because you don't have to have a jockey's license to ride in it. So yeah, that would be my most special day's racing. But it is actually on a race day at Newmarket, but it doesn't appear in the form book because it's not run under Jockey Club rules, because its rules predate the formation of the Jockey Club in the early 1700s. So yeah, that would be my most special day at the races. You wouldn't be able to find if you leaf through the form book. But there's, to be honest, on a day you have a winner, that particular day at the time you'd say this is as good as it gets. There was Chris Wright had a great saying in the Racing Post recently. I think he said racing is 90% disappointment, 10% excitement, and 1% sheer elation. And the sheer elation you get when you're having a winner at the time, that's as good as it gets. And I mean, if you were training a vast string of horses, you actually reach a point where the winners almost come along automatically, and there's something going wrong if you're not training winners on a sort of regular conveyor belt. But when you're only training a small number of largely undistinguished horses, which is the case for me and realistically for the majority for more than half the trainers, but of course, the majority of them, if you just read the headlines, you'd almost overlook that because you sort of only just really read about the headline trainers. But yeah, if you're operating at the lower levels, every winner is very special. But my first black type winner when Largesse in 1998, I don't know.
This was at Ayr.
Yes, yeah, on Ayr Gold Cup Day, won the Doonside Cup, a listed race ridden by John Egan, who still rides me for this day. He's been riding for me for 23 years. And yeah, that was, of course, you're young and cocky. That was only my fourth season. I thought, we've listed winner now.
It's going to be easy.
Going to be easy. And the horse actually was beaten in a photograph in a Group 2 race. Well, he was actually placed in 4 Group 2 races. One only beaten in the photo finish in the Yorkshire Cup the following year. At the time, you're thinking, this is going to be very easy. And, that was special. I'd have probably appreciated it even more if I'd known that it was going to be the only black type winner I'd trained in my first quarter century as a trainer. But yeah, that was special. But, there's been a lot of very happy days. Our stable star at the moment, Roy Rocket, he's won 9 races at Brighton. He's a real folk hero at Brighton.
Well, he was the next thing I was going to ask you. I've got it written down. We couldn't interview John Berry without mentioning the star of your yard in Roy Rocket, who I read didn't win a race for 16 races, but now has won 9 races at Brighton.
Yeah, never won elsewhere. Last year he came close to winning at Windsor. He was a close second at Windsor, but he's still never won anywhere else. Brighton seems to suit him. But yeah, I mean, he's a real folk hero there, and particularly as the more win times he's won there, the more of a following is developed. So all his wins have been very special, and arguably becoming even more special as they went on. And for me, all the more so for the fact that I bred him. So he's a 10-year-old now. So, he's effectively been on. It's 11 years ago that I had the mare covered by the stallion to produce him. So, he's been a big part of my life for a long time now. And yeah, he's provided us some wonderful days, and all the more special for sharing them with Larry and Iris McCarthy, who are daughter and mother. I've trained for the family since I think 1998, probably. The late Joe McCarthy, who's Larry's father, and Iris is his widow. I've trained for the family since then, and I've trained for some really nice people. I've been very lucky in that respect, but they're not the only people I'd make this comment about, but they are the perfect people to train for, and it's to share the joy with them makes it doubly special.
And you ride Roy every day, is that right?
Yes, well, this year I've changed around a little bit. Yana Trinakova, who works for me, I don't really know why it came about, but I went through a period of several years, and he was a difficult ride. Well, he was an easy enough ride once you got to know him, but he's the type of horse where if you rode him every day, you got used to him. And if you just swapped the riders around, he was a nuisance for everyone because no one could really get used to him. So I rode him every day for a few years, and this year I've actually changed it around, and I only ride him occasionally, and Yana rides him most days. And well, I can save my blushes by saying he hasn't won since Jana's become his regular rider. But in her defence, he hasn't run at Brighton since Jana's become his regular rider, because Brighton hasn't been racing this year. But as I say, I can spare my blushes by saying he hasn't won since Jana's been riding him, because it does pain me to say it that I actually think he behaves a little bit better when she rides him than when I do. But he's such a stable favourite, and in fact he's Snow White as well, obviously, and he's got a funny name, and he's really, he's the type of horse you don't need to leave his stable door shut. You can just leave it open. He can just wander around as he likes. He's sort of creature. Well, the centaur was the creature from Greek mythology that was half human, half horse, wasn't it? And if I sort of meet someone that I think is just the ultimate horseman, I sort of think of them as a centaur, that they're half human, half horse. But Roy's the reverse type of centaur, that he's almost half horse, half human.
And no plans to retire him yet, then? No.
Oh no, we've got to keep him going for when Brighton comes back, which hopefully will be next year. But but even without that, he's 10 years young. He didn't start winning he never won till he was 5, and because he took an awful long time to grow up, and he turned white very young. But other than the fact that he's a grey that's turned white, you'd think he was only half the age that he was, and he's a very sound horse and a very, very enthusiastic horse. Yeah, at some point he'll start giving out signs. He's not quite as good as he used to be, but that's not the be all and end all of everything. He's not giving any signs of the fact that he wants to take life easy. When he does, it'll become apparent, and we'll stop racing him. But no, it's not even I wouldn't even say it's an easy decision to keep racing him at the moment, because there's no reason to take the decision, because he's not giving any signs to suggest that the decision's even on the agenda at the moment.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's hope he makes it 10 or this year, or if not, make it 10 at Brighton next year. That'd be so special. There's another Brighton specialist, Paula Victoire, they were level pegging all the way through, who did win a race at Brighton last season, took him on to 10, and so I mean it's unrealistic to think he will ever become the winning most horse, because to do that he'd need to get on to 11. But I mean, for a long time now I've been saying if he never wins another race, it doesn't matter, because he's already done more than that. But yeah, if he could get on to 10, that'd be a wonderful milestone. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. For the pleasure he's given, we're well ahead on the deal already. And the nice thing is he's well ahead of, while he's been getting great pleasure from it too. Well, that's the most important thing. We come on to our favourites round now. This can be favourites of all time.
Let's find out John's favourites.
Who has been your favourite horse?
Well, if I look in the wider world, I would say Shergar. I was lucky enough to be at Ascot when he won the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Diamond Stakes in July 1981 when I was 15. And of course, he'd already won the Derby effortlessly. Had a slightly less flamboyant victory in the Irish Derby. I was cheeky enough, the wonderful old unsaddling enclosure with those lions and the marble steps that's sadly gone forever. The iconic winners' enclosure. As he was led away in the ropes, nowadays there's double railings and white plastic railings and everything. Before it was just a rope separating the horse from the crowd. I was cheeky enough to lean across the rope and pat him as he walked, as he was being led away. And for a racing obsessed 15-year-old boy from Scotland to be at Ascot, seeing one of the greatest horses ever winning a great race and patting him afterwards was very, very special. So yeah, I mean, I'd say of the wider world, I'd say Shergar, but the horses that you're involved with personally, albeit that they're racing at a much lower level, they become so special to you. But at the same time, nominating one is a little bit like saying to a parent, which your children do you love the most? But the ones that stay around for a long time and do the most, you inevitably become closer to them. But Roy Rocket will always have a very special place in my heart, as will Dear Kadushki, the horse who enabled me to, as I say, win the time plate in 3 different roles. But yeah, there's quite a lot of horses that have special places in my heart.
Who would be your favourite ever jockey?
Well, as I was saying, John Egan's been riding for me for 23 years, and yeah, I think in a general sense, it's quite easy for trainers and jockeys to fall out. When an announcement comes through that the jockey's been appointed stable jockey to a trainer, they look in the paper 10 years later, and you're rare to see them still riding for them. So when you're still calling on a jockey to ride for you for 23 years later, that says a lot. He's been a good friend to me. He's a wonderfully helpful jockey. He's a wonderfully good jockey, and I've got a huge amount of both affection and respect for him. Kieran Fallon, whom we mentioned earlier, absolutely terrific jockey. When I was growing up, Willie Carson was my favourite jockey because he was champion jockey.
Scotsman. He was Scotsman.
He was champion jockey. He was Scottish. Yeah. So you automatically honed in on the Scottish jockey. National Hunt jockeys. When I was young, my mother had horses with Gordon Richards. So Ron Barry was coming to the end of his great career at the time when I was starting to follow racing, and John Joe O'Neill was just getting going. The 2 great jockeys that rode for Gordon Richards at the time. So yeah, they'd both be great respect for admiration and respect for both of those. Yeah, but we're blessed in this sport to have many people who have excelled, and haven't just excelled. They've been come across as thoroughly admirable people in the process, and you couldn't possibly make that observation without sort of saying, Tony McCoy has typified what's the very best of everything a professional jockey should be. But as I say, we've been very. If you look around the jockeys ranks at any time, if you wanted to find someone that you could admire, you've never had to look very far.
What about your favourite race course?
Well, I'm pretty fond of Brighton. But yeah, I love Brighton, and I've been very fond of Brighton for a lot longer than Roy Rocket's been alive. We've had some very happy memories there. Lawrence Wadey, whom I've trained for my entire career, he's from Brighton. He actually lives out in the Far East and has lived out in the Far East for 30 years now, but he's from Brighton, and we'd always, well, not always, but we've often tried to aim some of his horses at Brighton, and Ethics Girl won the Brighton Cup, whom he owned. I've got many happy race days, including some when Lawrence has been there. Grew up near Kelso. It was a great place to start off going racing with your parents as a little boy. And yeah, I've always enjoyed going to Musselburgh. First time I went there, it was a flat only race course, and it was called Edinburgh when I was a schoolboy. And it was a really, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 at the time. It was a really low grade course at the time. It's turned itself inside out in recent years, renamed Musselburgh, because it is actually Musselburgh, and it's owned by East Lothian Council, so it was probably slightly unfair on East Lothian Council for Edinburgh to get the credit. But it's been a terrific racecourse for a long time now. Very, very well run, and yeah, we've been lucky there. I've actually had 2 horses who've broken track record there, but actually the same track record. A horse called Warring Kingdom broke the 2-mile track record there in 1999, and then a few years later, Jack Dawson broke the 2-mile track record on the flat. I think it was still flat only at the time. Yeah, we've been very lucky at Musselburgh. Haven't had a runner there for a few years now, but must put that right. And Jack Dawson actually, he's a lovely horse. We've got a picture down below of him winning it over hurdles at Southall with Tony McCoy on him, and he's jumping. He's stretched out so far you can't even see the jump in it. He's just clearing it by miles, and he actually won a hurdle race at Kelso one day. So yeah, Kelso, Musselburgh, and Brighton are 3 courses of which I've got a absolutely brimful memory bank of happy memories of all 3 of them.
Thank you. Changing tack a bit, what's your favourite other sport?
Well, I love cricket, but I'm a bit of a phony saying that because I can't play. I mean, I played a bit at prep school, but not good enough I wasn't good enough to get in the school team. But at public school, in the summer, the cricket and the sport, we'd sport every afternoon during the week, and you either did cricket or athletics, and it wasn't either or. You couldn't do both. Or you certainly couldn't. If you're doing one seriously, you couldn't do both because you'd be having to do it every day. And I was quite a good runner as a schoolboy, 1,500 metres in the summer and cross country in the winter. So in the summer term, I'd be doing the athletics training every afternoon. So ended up, for the second half of my schooling, never playing at all. And so yeah, if I was called up for a cricket match now, the only way I could be of any asset to a side is if they were struggling to get 11 people together, and they had a few good batsmen, so there was no possibility of the tail enders being called in to bat, and they'd enough bowlers that there was no requirement to fill a bowling rank, and the only requirement was to turn up and be the 11th person on an otherwise short of numbers team. But yeah, I love cricket. I love watching it. I love reading. I've got some great cricket books on the bookshelf. Love reading about it. I'm a member of the Norfolk Cricket Society, and they do great cricket talks in the evening. So I love watching it and hearing about it. But as I say, I'm a phony because I just can't play at all. Useless.
Well, it's very much like racing. It's a very historical sport.
Yeah, I mean that's a wonderful thing about it. The more racing and cricket are both the same, in that the more you dig into it, not just in depth on the present day, but the more you dig into it going back, the more you enjoy it. And I don't think you can be a true racing man without it's a while since Lester Piggott's been riding. It's a while since Sir Gordon Richards, a long time since Sir Gordon Richards has been riding, and he retired 12 years before I was born or something. But if a racing man, if your pulse doesn't quicken a little bit by the names of the greats of the past, and if you love cricket, and Harold Larwood and Don Bradman and Keith Miller and names like that don't excite you, then you're not really a cricket man. I always loved history at school, and the sports I love the history of them too.
Oh, that's good to hear. And now, you've been training for 25 years, and for people who are listening to this show who are not from the UK, can you let us know what it's like training in Newmarket?
It would spoil you for training anywhere else. It would be a step down to go anywhere else because it is so easy. It would be much harder to train anywhere else. Or basically, all you have to do is organise your stabling within the town. Don't need to worry about your training facilities because there's part of the heath on either side of the town, and 2,500 acres with every facility you could possibly want. You just need to organise stabling within riding distance of the heath, and then get permission from the jockey club to use the heath. And the jockey club it run on a sort of communal system that everyone pays per horse. I think it's about just over £130 plus VAT per month for each horse, which sounds a lot, but nowadays everything costs money, and that's £4.5 a day for just unlimited access to the best training grounds in the world is a steal. And the great thing about it is, if you're training a dozen horses in a little yard round the street corner, or you've got 200 horses in one of the really showpiece yards, you've got exactly the same facilities. You ride up to the heath and you just go where you want. And the best horse in Newmarket and the worst horse in Newmarket have got, and the most valuable and the least valuable have got access to exactly the same facilities. And you'll have people say, oh, more than 2,000 horses in training, isn't it just chaos on the heath? But the heath is 2,500 acres, and the sort of window of training is 6 hours in the morning. There'll be horses using the heath at 6, there'll be horses using the heath at 12. So you spread that large amount of horses out, spread them out over 2,500 acres and over 6 hours. You can go at times on to various parts of the heath and hardly see another horse. It's just horse heaven, and you've got so many farriers, good farriers in the town just round the corner. You've got the best vets you could possibly have, 2 outstanding veterinary hospitals, horse transport firms. It's just so easy. It's just so very, very easy. And going back to what I say, if you love history, the icing on the cake is you've got the whole history of the sport on your doorstep.
Well, it sounds like you're living and working in the best place. What does the future hold for John Berry?
Well, when I started training, I had no lofty ambitions. My ambition was to survive for 5 years. I've now survived for 5 batches of 5 years. This is my 26th year. That'd be nice to survive another, survive the 6th batch of 5 years, get up to 30 years. But just to keep going, really. Yeah, it's not easy. To be honest, as a small trainer, it's very, very hard to balance the books. And I'm lucky enough that I own the property and I'm hands-on. If it wasn't the case that both of those 2 things applies, it would be a borderline impossible to balance the books. But yeah, just to keep going, really. And I mean, obviously want to train a few winners, and if you never train a winner, realistically, you're not going to keep going. But so as I say, train some winners, both for that 1% of sheer relation, and also from the fact that having a certain degree of success is essential to get confidence behind you for people to send you horses. But no, just keep going, really. I'm lucky to do what I do, and if I can do it a bit longer, yeah, I'm very lucky to have done it for this long. If I can do it for a while longer, then that's great. Whether that's a bit longer or a long time longer, but I just like to keep doing while I've got my health and I'm able to do what I'm doing now. If I can keep doing it, then that's grand.
Well, let's hope you can, John. You have more of those 1%ers. Roy Rocket makes it 10 at Brighton, hopefully next year, or even 10 wins this year. And thank you very much for joining me on the paddock and the pavilion, and the best of luck for the rest of the season, and hopefully you get a few more winners.
Well, hope springs eternal in the human breast. No, thank you very much, Stephen. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pad.
Sports Social Podcast Network.